Parshas Naso from the year 1960. Hold on, let's bring it up. Okay, hope we could get people in on the class when they want to come in. Okay, so this is a Sicha from Shabbos Parshas Naso, the 9th of Sivan, the year Tafshin Chaf, which is the secular calendar year of 1960. My father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, tells, after the initial times, Rabbeinu Hazoki Nasa Lemezrich, after the Alter Rebbe traveled to the city of Mezrich, is where his teacher, when we say Mezrich, we're referring to the Alter Rebbe traveling to his teacher, the Magid. And it was already well known that the Alter Rebbe belonged to what's known as the group of the Chasidim. His father-in-law, which was not friendly towards the Hasidic new group, and when he realized that his son-in-law, which was a great giant in Torah, the Alter Rebbe, was becoming part of that group and traveling to Mezrich to his teacher, so he took him off all the positions of importance that his father-in-law, who was an important person of the city, he lowered his son-in-law, the Alter Rebbe, and kind of demoted him from any level of responsibility in connection to the community. And he says, oh, thanks, Howard. I just wanted to make sure that it's coming on clear. And moving Gadol Hardifish Hoyler Rabbeinu Zaken, and we can understand clearly. Not only did his father-in-law demote him, Reb Shimon, demote him from his. We're going to try to figure out the waiting room. I can't figure out how to close it. It just went back on. Okay, so after the Alter Rebbe was going to Mezrich, and his father-in-law, who was not friendly to Hasidim, demoted him from any position of importance in the city. He was being harassed by the people of the city because he belonged to this new group called the Hasidim. Meaning the group was founded by the Baal Shem Tov, and then his student the Magid, and now the Alter Rebbe was the third generation belonging to the group of Hasidim. Ve'afu became, nevertheless, although he was being harassed and he was demoted, there was still a group of people, at least 10 people, of young, eager students that were Mekusharim, means connected to the Alter Rebbe. Means although he was being harassed and he was demoted, etc. It was a small minyan, meaning just a narrow group of 10. A mogerer minyan, I guess that's a Yiddish word for a small minyan. This is how my father-in-law told the story. The Rebbe was very precise when he told the story, and he only considered a story to be factual if he heard it from his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe. Not that he felt that all the stories weren't true, but he didn't know for sure unless he heard the story from his father-in-law. When he says minyan kachish, he means that it wasn't just that he had a minyan, he had a group of 10 great students. He had some simple students as well. Alpha became, nevertheless, although he had a small group of students and he was being harassed, Alpha became kivin shvar hoyilay minyan mishlay, though once he had a minyan, I mean a minyan is a group of 10, Eida Sheleimah, a complete group, Amar Rabbeinu Zaken she'enim misyarim yosim hashanim, because once he had a minyan, the Alter Rebbe said he was no longer afraid of those two. The Rebbe now points out who those two people were. We have no idea, but evidently there were two people that he could have been afraid of. And once he had a minyan, he was no longer afraid of them. And that was the minyan that the Alter Rebbe had. Bein anshe a minyan, amongst the people of this minyan that the Alter Rebbe had, meaning a small group. Not all of them were great Talmudic scholars. Some of them were simple people. Amongst this group of so to say, that gathered around the Alter Rebbe, there was a Yid called Reb Shlomo. He was a baker. Lekach macher. Lekach is a kind of cookie without sugar, sweet cookie that we eat. So it's called a lekach macher. He was a cookie. He was a baker. Why was he called Reb Shlomo the lekach macher in Yiddish. So they called him, that was his name. That's what people referred to him. Reb Shlomo the baker, but not really the baker, the cookie maker. Why? Because his business was to make these cookies which are served for a Sudas mitzvah, for a mitzvah gathering, like a bris or a siyam, etc. Those days, the Rebbe points out, why was he called Reb Shlomo the lekach macher? Because he made cookies for a Sudas mitzvah, for a meal of a mitzvah, because those days it was unheard of for a person just to have a piece of cake, meaning to indulge in a sweet. You only did it if it was connected to a Sudas mitzvah, a bris, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, a siyam, etc. Means a person didn't just have a piece of cake or a cookie that wasn't connected to something that was a mitzvah, or Sudas mitzvah, a meal of a mitzvah. By days, and because he was Reb Shlomo the lekach macher, so he became known to the people of the city because he was always making the cookies for the mitzvahs. He was there he was hired to make the cookies for these events. Okay, so one of the initial people that connected himself to the Alter Rebbe, when the Alter Rebbe was really running a thin group of people while he was being harassed by his father-in-law and others for becoming a member of the Hasidim, was this Reb Shlomo, the lekach macher, who made cookies. He was a baker. V'sipur Reb Shlomo. So Reb Shlomo tells the story, for he was from the original group of the Alter Rebbe, from the original entourage, right? Shebishnas Tov Kuf Lamed Aleph, in the year 1771. I think I'm right. Oid b'chaya Magid, still in the lifetime of the Magid, when the Alter Rebbe was a chassid still of the Magid. He had this little group, he had this little group of chevra around him. He's Vaid Rabbeinu Azakim in Tamida b'shloishes me'agbala. The Alter Rebbe had a Farbrengen in the lifetime of the Magid, when he was a young man, very young man, in his late teens, early 20s, that he had a group of people around him, and he had a Farbrengen in the 3 days prior, which is known as the Shloishes me'agbala, the 3 days prior to Shavuos. Ubein hadvarim diber oidis mash amar kadosh baruch hu Moshe Rabbeinu b'shloishes me'agbala. And over there, in that Farbrengen, the Alter Rebbe spoke amongst a small group of people. He spoke about the conversation God had with Moshe, had with God, that God tells Moshe, "V'gam b'cho yaminu lo'olam," that when God tells Moshe about what's going to happen, the effect of Matan Torah, the effect of Matan Torah is not just going to be an effect between the relationship of God and the Jewish people, but it's also going to affect the relationship between the Jewish people and Moshe. God said, "V'gam b'cho," even in you, Moshe, yaminu lo'olam. From after this, they're going to believe in you forever. Seemingly, it looks like God was bribing Moshe, right? The Alter Rebbe says God was bribing Moshe. Why should Moshe toil himself in the giving of the Torah? God says there's something in it for you as well. They're going to believe in you forever. So the Alter Rebbe says it seems like God was bribing Moshe. That because Moshe Rabbeinu was going to fulfill the obligation or the requirement, what was asked from him, to bring the Jewish people to Mount Sinai. God's promised him, there's something in it for you, not just for God, that God's going to have the time to the marriage, so to say, the giving of the Torah, that Moshe also is going to benefit. So Rabbeinu Azakin Hevi B'dvarav, when the Alter Rebbe spoke about this, in the year 1771, in the 3 days before Shavuos, he brought the Pirush of the Even Ezer. The Even Ezer is a commentary on the Chumash. Shahayu b'nei Yisrael nashim shahaysam hanavu b'safek. At that time, there were people still doubting Moshe's prophecy. Even though the Torah already tells us that the Jewish people believed in Moshe, in God, and Moshe his servant, by the crossing of the Red Sea. Sham Omar Vayar Yisrael v'lo kol Yisrael. Nevertheless, the Even Ezer says the Jewish people saw. It says not all the Jewish people. I mean, some people still didn't believe, even though there was a splitting of the Red Sea, and even though there's the 10 plagues and all that, there were still those who didn't believe. It says the Jewish people saw, not all the Jewish people saw. And this is why the Even Ezer says, "V'gam b'cha yaminu sha'ata nevi'ai." That what's going to change with Matan Torah is that even those who doubted Moshe's prophecy after everything he did, splitting the Red Sea, now everyone's going to believe in Moshe's prophecy. Kimiyata is emes etzlam inina nevuah. It's going to become real. Emes means from the word truth, emes. To even those who doubted Moshe up until this point, the prophecy of Moshe. Still didn't answer the question that it seems like God is bribing Moshe. Vehevi gamis divrei Ramban, and the Alter Rebbe also brought the words of Nachmanides. Shedeiches divrei Even Ezra. He disagrees with Even Ezra. But when the Nachmanides, the Ramban says, Shezera Avram la yistapku b'nevuah. He disagrees with Even Ezra, and he says the Jewish people never doubted the prophecy, the concept of prophecy. And therefore, the Ramban explains this conversation differently, that what changed, in this talk that the Alter Rebbe had as a chassid still, the Magen is rich, in the year 1771, the Alter Rebbe did take on and accept, so to say, justified the opinion of Even Ezra that there were those up until the giving of the Torah who doubted Moshe's prophecy, unlike the feeling of the Ramban that says that the Jewish people never doubted the prophecy of Moshe. But he explained that the doubt wasn't on the belief in the concept of prophecy. Everyone believed that there's a concept of prophecy, meaning he kind of bridged, the Alter Rebbe was bridging the opinion of the Ramban with the opinion of the Even Ezra. The Even Ezra seems to say that they were doubting, the Jewish people were doubting prophecy. The Ramban says the Jewish people never doubted prophecy. The Alter Rebbe says they didn't doubt prophecy. The question they had is who said Moshe was the prophet? It means they didn't doubt prophecy, but they were doubting if Moshe was the prophet. As the Friedrich Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, tells over the story that was told by Reb Shlomo the Lekachmacher about the first Farbrengen the Alter Rebbe had in the 3 days before Shavuos in the year 1771. Oib der is der. In Yiddish, that's an expression. Is he? Is this the person we're talking about? We believe in prophecy, but who says Moshe is the prophet? And therefore God told Moshe by Matan Torah that those who doubted if you're the prophet, that now they're going to believe that you're the prophet. This is all part of the talk that the Alter Rebbe had with his small group of Hasidim, and one of them was Reb Shlomo the Lekachmacher in the year 1771, prior to the holiday of Shavuos. B'Sayim Rabbeinu Hazaken, the Alter Rebbe finished off in his little talk like this: Kula ma'aminim sheyeshna Rebbe. Everyone believes there's a Rebbe. Ach tzarich leida sha'Rebbe haya habal Shem Tov. The Rebbe said, then you have to. We know there's a Rebbe. We know there's a Navi. But you have to know who the Rebbe is. The Rebbe is the Baal Shem Tov, not someone else. Ubedar zeh Rebbe HaMagid, and the Alter Rebbe continued. And who's the Rebbe in our generation? Is the Holy Magidim is rich. This is how the Rebbe opened up his talk, Shabbos Naso, in the year 1960. Now, the Rebbe is now talking. And now, this is all the Rebbe opened with the story that the previous Rebbe told of the first Farbrengen, one of the first Farbrengens the Alter Rebbe had as kind of a leader. He was not even a Rebbe yet. He himself was just a chassid of the Magid. He was going through tremendous harassment by his own family, his father-in-law, and others in the city. He says that doesn't change the fact. He said the Navi is the Baal Shem Tov, the Navi is the Magid. The Rebbe continues, what does this mean to us? Isa beZohar, the Zohar teaches, there's an extension of Moshe. Hispashtusa means from the word lihispashet. There's an extension of Moshe in every generation. This is not just something that's in the Zohar, it's also found in the revealed parts of Torah. Like the Rebbe says, and everything that we find in the Kabbalistic teachings has to have a source also in the revealed parts of Torah. And where's the source? That there's an extension of Moshe in every generation. The Rebbe quotes there's a medrash. The medrash says, Ein dor she'ein boi ka'Avram ki Yaakov k'Moshe. There is no generation that exists in the history of the Jewish people that doesn't have an Avram, doesn't have a Yaakov, and doesn't have a Moshe. V'imkein. So the Rebbe says, if that's the case, the Rebbe again is talking in 1960. Davar parshat eitzel kol b'nei Yisrael hamaminim b'divrei Chazal. So it has to be simple. By anyone who believes in the words of our rabbis, Shekenu emes is not just a statement, that's the truth. Every generation has an Avram, Yaakov, and Moshe. Aval Sheleimah, the question is, like the Alter Rebbe questioned, or kind of clarified, in the year 1771, Taf Kuf Lamed Aleph, Mi who, where is where? Who's who? Who's Avram, who's Yaakov, and who's Moshe? Therefore the Rebbe continues again in 1960. Tzarech le'eda, shebedarish Baal Shem Tov, in the generation of the Baal Shem Tov, Hoyezeh Baal Shem Tov. It was the Baal Shem Tov. And after that, the next generation, it was the Magadim is rich. And after that, he says, it was the Admir Hazakin, the Alter Rebbe himself. Until our generation. The Rebbe of our generation, the Rebbe says, is the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, my father-in-law. The Rebbe says even more so. If the Rebbe was saying it obvious in those days, in the year 1771, when the ideas of Chassidus was just starting, as my father, when he told the story, the Rebbe says, I have regards from 175 years ago.
So the one is Abraham, one is Yitzchak, one is Yaakov. So the three weren't, I mean, they're named, but are those Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, or those are just Abraham of their generation, and Yitzchak and Yaakov are unnamed? And maybe they're not in the, the line of those Rebbeim. Maybe they're in some other parts of the people.
So that's the whole idea of the talk. The Rebbe's idea of the talk is he's focusing more on the Moshe, and the Rebbe's focusing on is the Rebbe says that with the Jewish people, it means in combining what the Ramban and the Even Ezra says, the Jewish people never doubted in a prophecy. The question is, who is he? And therefore, the God promised Moshe, V'gam b'cha, they're going to believe it's you. The Rebbe says we have to know, he quoted the Alter Rebbe, that the Baal Shem Tov was the Moshe in his generation, the Magid was in his generation, and the Rebbe continues, in 1960, so too the Baal Alter Rebbe was in his generation, and the previous Rebbe is in our generation. Whenever the Rebbe spoke about the previous Rebbe like that, he's also referring to himself. The Rebbe never accepted as if he was his own leadership. So officially, the Rebbe is like this. Therefore, the previous Rebbe says, "I'm giving you regard from 175 years ago." If it's not 175, we're 175 years plus 1960 to 225. It has to be obvious. Now the Rebbe continues. When the previous Rebbe, so to say, revealed or announced the statement, Kol Koira means the outcry. The previous Rebbe started a campaign in 1944, Tafshin Dald, I believe, or maybe it was 1940. I think it was 1944. With the Kol Koira means the Rebbe, he said La'alta L'Tshuva. If we do Tshuva, La'alta means if we speed up the Tshuva, La'alta Geula, we'll get to Geula redemption. And that was in the worst years of the war. Is Afitzu Chasidim Sakol Koira V'Sifra Shuhu. So the previous Rebbe said that when we usher in a tshuva, when we speed up the tshuva, we'll speed up the redemption. The Chasidim, it's known a story, the Rebbe's not telling the story, but there's a story of those who went out there and said, who's the Rebbe? Who's the Mashiach? The Mashiach is the Rebbe, he's the previous Rebbe. So once someone came to one, not to Chabad Rebbe, to a Polish Rebbe. Polish Rebbe means from other groups of Chasidim. And he's claiming the claim, Hayitochen, how is it possible? What kind of chutzpah, so to say? How is it allowed that there's the Chasidim walking around saying, do tshuva because Geula is going to come, and then adding in who's the Geula, who's the Goyal, who's the Redeemer, is the previous Rebbe. So people were demanding from other Rebbes, kind of calling foul on this whole idea. So what did this Rebbe answer? Hey Shiva Admar now, the Rebbe's not saying his name. Heaven is boining. He says, pay attention 1 second. Listen here. We all believe that Mashiach is going to come. That's what we say. Some people say it every day in the animamim, in the declarations of belief. This Polish Rebbe says some don't say it in the animamim, some say it in thought, they think it. So we all agree that Mashiach has to come. He has to be here, right? Because we say he's going to come. If that's the case, so the Polish Rebbe said to this person who was complaining, you know you're not Mashiach, right? This Rebbe says, I know that I'm not Mashiach. But someone has to be because we say animamim. Why is it bothering you so much? That the Chabad Chasidim are saying it's the previous Rebbe. When the Rebbe says, so too in our situation. This idea that we have a Rebbe. We said already, the Medrash says in every generation there's an extension of Moshe. The Medrash quotes in every generation there's an Avram, Yaakov, and Moshe. Kasher nishelas hashayla mihu. So if you're going to ask yourself, who's the Moshe of our generation? Ve'ein al mi litles, and you look around and you can't find the candidate. Haramayna pashit shehu, there is there. Who is the Moshe of our generation? Tchila Baal Shem Tov, it was the Baal Shem Tov, and then it was the Magid, then it was the Alter Rebbe, until Kvoi Kedush Baruch HaMiyadim, to my father, the previous Rebbe. Aaron, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, how do you speed up? You said they could speed up?
By doing tshuva. If you do tshuva, la'alta l'tshuva, if you do repentance, return, it will speed up the redemption.
So just an individual does it, or we have to all do it as because not everyone does it.
Both. If you have to do it as an individual and encourage others. That's why the previous Rebbe put out as a kol kaira, that you should inspire others to do tshuva, because it's going to be dependent on everyone doing tshuva, but surely you have to do it yourself. A combination of the two. It means hopefully it's the more people that do tshuva, and look how many people have returned to tshuva in the past 70, 80 years. In all spheres, in all groups of Yiddishkeit. So the Rebbe continues. This is not just an idea to say who's the Moshe Rabbeinu. This also comes to Aaron's question, to a lesson. The Ha'ira means the lesson or the inspiration that we could take about spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus. Yesh from the those who think. I think this is going to address Aaron's question. Yesh from the those who think. The very fact there's still people that are misnagdim. Misnagdim means they are against. The word neged. Chassidus, the teachings of Chassidus. We still can't spread the wellsprings because we're concerned with the negativity, with those who are against the wellsprings. It doesn't work like that. But Darius HaKoidim in the initial generations, meaning to say in the previous generations, in the beginning, the people that were anti-Chassidus were great. Some of them were great giants in Torah, but they made a mistake. Everyone can make a mistake. They thought, according to their understanding of Torah, the kivin shahayu az kitos musukenas, in those days they were just getting out of the situation of certain groups, whether it's the Frankists or the Shabtai Tzvi people. They were concerned, and they were not right. The Rebbe says it was a mistake. The Rebbe says they weren't intentionally against Chassidus. They thought that maybe Chassidus is a dangerous new idea that we don't know where it's going. But that's years ago when people were concerned that this may be another offshoot of Yiddishkeit. After 200 years, we all know, even a simple person, even Gentiles, when we say that someone is a chassid, what does it mean a chassid? What's the definition of a chassid? Or a chasida, or a female chassid? What's the definition of a chassid? The chassid has a beard, doesn't touch his beard. Maniach bei zugas tefillin, puts on 2 pairs of tefillin. Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. Leivish tzitzis kaful shmeina, wears proper tzitzis. Chulu v'chulu. V'hataina hayachida negda hi. So what's the only thing you could say? You can't say the person's. I mean, initially they thought this is going to lead people away from Yiddishkeit, from Torah mitzvahs. But here you see clearly it's not true. Everyone knows a chassid is a person who doesn't touch his beard. A chassid is a person who puts on 2 pairs of tefillin. A chassid is a woman you see in the shuk or on the streets handing out Shabbos candles. So how could you doubt their connection to Yiddishkeit? So the only thing you could say about the chassid is hayosei batlin. He's a batlin. I don't know. Batlin is a person who uneducated. Is kind of not a person of society. Shebatum imlechas olam. Not really. He's batlin, nullifies himself from worldly things. Even Shemachah b'tefillah. So why? Because the chassid davens longer. Until he finishes putting on 2 pairs of tefillin, etc. And if the person is also is careful in certain mitzvahs, it's an expression of their consciousness of all the mitzvahs. Tefillin is a good indication where a person is standing. There's no justification according to Torah to say there's something wrong with Chassidus. So why are they against Chassidim? Because their fathers were against Chassidim. Why were their fathers against Chassidim? Because their fathers were against Chassidim. Not that there's a fund that you could ask them, what specifically do you have against Chassidim? So if there's no justification according to the Torah to have a concern of Chassidus, therefore the Rebbe says there has to be no more concern. There's no justification, there's no entity here. It's only a challenge. Like any other challenge in a science, by definition, is not real. Therefore, anyone who questions, and the Rebbe is talking 1960, about the concern of spreading the well-singers of Chassidus because there's those who disagree, the Rebbe says that's not a concern, because the disagreement doesn't come from a justified place. We don't have to be aggressive. We walk in the ways of peace and the ways of kindness. Our job is to awaken the inner core of the soul of the Jew. And how do you wake up? What is the ingredient that wakes up the pnimis haneshama? Is pnimis haTorah? Is the inner secrets of Torah? Shemekasheres is Yisrael, and the inner secrets of Torah that awakens the inner core of the soul connects the Jewish person im hapnimis tekuchabricha with the core of the God. Hold on, Aaron. And from there it goes to the revealed parts of Torah. Which this is the source of the whole core of creation. And when you could awaken not the external of the person's soul, but the essence of the person's soul, with the essence of through the essence of Torah, and connect it to the essence of God, and that spills over in all their expressive ways of connection. Then it brings down all the blessings, with everything you need, in blessings of health of your children, and the hatzlach of your children, chaya, in your own health, mizoyne with your parnasa, and it should be in a way with revicha and abundance. Yes, Aaron?
Could you be a Hasidic with one pair of tefillin, and you did it every day?
Sure, you but
so why does he mention that Hasidic, this movement had two pairs of tefillin, even though we know some of them do?
Because Hasidim, in traditionally a Hasid puts on two pairs of tefillin, Rashi and Benutam. If a person is not holding there yet, there's a stages. Doesn't mean you have to say, if I only put on one pair of tefillin, therefore I'm not going to learn Hasidus, or I'm not going to talk about Hasidus. You'll get there eventually. Everything is a path. You can't travel heavy from the beginning.
Now, what about the beard? You, as a Hasidic, you can't shave your beard. Nobody ever shaves their beard in the movement?
The Hasidic teachings is not to shave the beard, because the beard, according to Hasidus and Kabbalah, is the 13 attributes of mercy. But it takes time. My grandfather was a Hasid from Hungary, where they did shave their beards. He only started to grow his beard in his late 70s. The Rebbe gave him $13 many times to connection to 13 attributes of mercy. You grow to it. It's not something, again, the Rebbe told my grandfather, you have to make sure you make a resolution for growing a beard. You don't just put it on Sunday and take it off on Friday. All right, let's continue. Once my father, the Rebbe continues in this, like I said, a warm Farbrengen. The Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe said once, with regard to the unique approach that the Baal Shem Tov had with the teaching of love of our fellow Jew. It's called Avos Yisrael. What does it mean to have love of a fellow Jew? That's not that to love your fellow Jews is Torah. Torah says we have to recha kamoicha, like it says in the Torah we have to recha kamoicha. V'ila Baal Shem Tov. So what did the Baal Shem Tov add? It's not the Baal Shem Tov didn't teach us you have to love your fellow Jew. That it says in the Torah. We have Rabbi Kiva Zeklal Gadol B'Torah. So what did the Baal Shem Tov add? V'ila Baal Shem Tov hera es asib lekach favos. Yeah, the Rebbe uses a beautiful word. The Rebbe says the farvos. A person opens the Torah. The Torah says we have to recha kamoicha. You have to love your fellow Jew, but the Torah doesn't tell you why you have to love your fellow Jew. The Baal Shem Tov told us the farvas. The farvas means the why. Why do you have to love your fellow Jew? Chleimer, meaning to say, be'inin avos Yisrael, when it comes to loving your fellow Jew, shetzrichim la'oyev kol Yehudi, that a person has an obligation. Doesn't say love your friend. Doesn't say love your business partner. It says love every Jew. That's the definition. Just by the fact that person is a Jew, you have to love him or her. So the Rebbe says like this: shetzrichim la'oyev kol Yehudi, you have to love every single Jew. Not just someone who's in your own social circles. Even if you feel you're a special person, you're a unique person, and there's a simple person, right? If that exists, so that person also you have to love. That's part of the Torah. You don't just love certain Jews. And not just that person that's maybe simple out of your social space, but out of your physical space. Someone who's all the way b'katzei tevel, and some are all in the middle of nowhere. It's not just nowhere physically. It's also spiritually. So what did the Baal Shem Tov teach us? Hera Baal Shem Tov the Baal Shem Tov said. So if Avos Yisrael means It's an unconditional love to every single Jew, no matter where that Jew is found, physically, spiritually, what kind of level that Jew is at. So what did the Baal Shem Tov add to this? That's all the Torah says that. Ha'era Baal Shem Tov asibas adavid. The Baal Shem Tov showed us the farvos, the reason. V'hainu sheheres my loss shekol Yehudi. He said that you don't just love a Jewish person. There's a reason, because every Jew has something to love. There's a uniqueness. There's a mile of every Jew, and he taught us what that mile is. Yes, Sharna?
So I'm trying to follow the argument. He's saying that, okay, in defense of the Hasidim against the Miknagdim. Okay, now he's giving all the positives, the Baal Shem Tov, and all the positives. But that doesn't rationally rule out that there are individuals, maybe they're not called Misnagim or Hasidim, but that are could be this, special people, okay, that are not in these particular categories.
1,000%. It's not talking about the only unique people. We're talking about over here is that, but the Rebbe led into the second part of the original talk was that if a person doesn't want to spread the teachings of Chassidus because he or she is concerned that there's people against it, and those people that are against it have a justified reason. The Rebbe said there's no more justified reason. There's no more concern to spread.
Right. So we got that part there. That it's not good to be negative against people who are doing good things, but that still doesn't rationally rule out people who are not. Maybe they're not opposing Hasidim. Maybe they're not Hasidim, but maybe they are special people.
100%. No argument. Yeah. No argument there at all. So the Rebbe says, so what did the Baal Shem Tov teach us? The Baal Shem Tov taught us the farvos. Why do you have to love every Jewish person? And it's like this. I think he's talking about this, the previous Rebbe. The Baal Shem Tov used to send his students, called the Chevre Kadisha, the Holy Assembly. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe would specifically send his great students, meaning to say people of stature, on learning, etc., to learn certain good qualities, attributes from the most simple people. For instance, what kind of things did they have to learn? Midas HaBitachon. The person could study Sha'ar Bitachon a whole day and could learn all the books a whole day. But when it comes to actually trusting God, they're lacking the trust. And where did they need to learn trust? Not from another scholar, but actually from a simple person's level of trust. Ukenira, the Rebbe says seemingly, Shekisher Advarmhu, the idea was like this. What did the Baal Shem Tov, why did the Baal Shem Tov specifically find a simple person to teach a great master certain attributes like the attributes of trust? Because through that, he wasn't just, so to say, utilizing the simple person for that person's his or her trust in God, but also showing that even a simple person has something to teach. We see many times there's self-sacrifice by simple people much greater than there is self-sacrifice for God by the intellectuals. As the famous idea is taught, it's easy to put your heel in boiling water than to place your head in boiling water. As an idea that a simple person will have more belief in God than the head, which is an intellectual. This is what it means. We're going to learn, I think it's next week, that it says Moshe Rabbeinu was was the most humble person from any other person in the world. Why was he so humble from every person? He humbled himself. He felt himself small. It says Moshe Rabbeinu, this is brought down, the Rebbe says this many times. Moshe Rabbeinu, not only did he look through his generation, but he looked through all the generations. And when he saw our generation, the generation of the coming of Mashiach, which were seemingly very disconnected, very confused, all the things that we could say were not intellectuals or Torah scholars that like they once were. And Moshe was humbled by our generation. Why? What humbled Moshe about our generation? Because our generation has something unique that other generations do not have. The level of self-sacrifice, the unconditional commitment to Hashem. And the Baal Shem Tov explained. What was that? I think the previous Rebbe was saying. The idea that the Baal Shem Tov sent his students to learn from simple people. It wasn't just to learn the actual attributes from them, but to be complete in the attributes, to really elevate and emulate the attributes of bitachon, etc., of self-sacrifice, to really see it on the highest level of performance. They needed to learn it from the simple people. The Rebbe says ideas like this. Okay, this is an idea in Chassidus. The word hisoiris means to awaken, not to create. When we say that midos, the attributes, get awakened by the intellect, means the emotions of a person is there before. The proof is you can have two smart people and they have a different emotional response to something. So the attributes is preconditioned, so to say, in a person's character. But what awakens an emotion is usually the seichel. That's what a person's all about, that your intellect control and direct the midos, the attributes. So the Rebbe says, when a person understands something that's good, this is a good idea. So therefore, that awakens your chesed quality and closeness because it's good to you. If you realize something is bad, right? This is a bad idea. What emotional response do you get from understanding? You have to understand that it's bad. But once you understand that it's bad, what does it reveal? It awakens the attribute of gvura, of severity, of distance, of, whoa, this is something I have to stay away from. What reveals the midos? Means a person has an attribute to kindness or limitations or din or gvura. But how do you know what to be giving to, and how do you know to withdraw from? Your mind understands this is good for you, this is bad for you. Exercise is good, overeating is bad. I mean, there's a lot of things that you respond to, but you have to have the information. But that's the way the mind guides the actual attribute. But the way the attributes are on their own, like I said before, they're greater than the intellect. The intellect is only the tool that guides and directs the attributes. Like it says, Za batika achidutalia, Za, which is referring to the zeramp and the midos, it's connected with keser, much higher than intellect. But the power of intellect is to control the midos. But the actual source of the midos, of the attributes, of the emotions are stronger. And the bat chachma is not in keser, it's only in the mazel, which is lower. This is what we see sometimes also. After a person awakens an attribute by intellect, it means their intellect awakens their emotional response. The attribute itself will take over a power much greater than the intellect that inspired them. It means if you understand you have to have a certain response to something, negative or positive, your mind will initiate it, will inspire it, but the midah will take over the feeling. A person gets very excited. That's already past your intellect. But why is it that your midah becomes stronger than the intellect that inspires it? If you should what the intellect is really doing is just opening the valve, the door, to let the midah connect its root. But once the midah connects its root, because the midah, the attribute, the emotion, is much stronger than the intellect, it's much powerful. Meaning you could end up giving much more, let's say in a giving way. Let's say you want to give something. So your mind understands to give, but maybe it understands it more limited. Once the emotion takes over, you're going to be much more giving. Why? Because the midah is much stronger than the intellect. This is what it means. We're going back that the Baal Shem Tov said that the students had the intellect of the midah, of the attributes. But to find how do you really complete a midah, how do you really trust God, how do you really love God, he would send them to simple people because they were more in tune with their midas than they were with their intellect. To learn what it means to reveal your attributes at their root. And the Baal Shem Tov understood that this quality a simple person has more than the intellectual. The intellectual, that this is the negative of intellect. Then the negative intellect, that when the more the intellect shines, the more it restricts the midah, right? You see a person who's really excited about something. You say, oh, be a little bit more controlled. Why? What have to be more controlled? Who said so? Because in your mind, you decided I have to be controlled. So therefore, they don't have it complete. Like we said, and this is what it means that Moshe Rabbeinu saw the uniqueness of our generation, because Mesiras Nefesh also is higher than intellect. The idea to give up your life for something is greater than the mind can understand. And this is the idea. So what the Rebbe is saying is that what's the farvos? The farvos means again, what the Baal Shem Tov showed was that actually what he did is he elevated the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'recha kamecha. Up until then, someone would say, what does it mean to love another Jew? That I'm such a good person, that I'm such a special person, I'm such a smart person, I'm such an accomplished person. The Torah says I have to love another Jew, even though I see nothing to love. I'm going to love that person because I'm such a great person. The Baal Shem Tov, this is what you're talking about. You have to love that person. That person has so much to give you. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov explained. The Baal Shem Tov showed that it's not a Kabbalist all love. You're not loving the next person because God forced you to. The Baal Shem Tov revealed there's so much to love of every single Jew. You think you have something special. You're so limited in yourself. Go to find the simple person. That person could live Shabbos. That person could live Amunah. That person could live Bitachon. In my day, Teres HaChassidus, the teachings of Chassidus, Nif'eles HaMailis D'Ishtalmus HaMides Gam Eitzel Bal Moichin. What the Baal Shem Tov wanted was that this unique quality that sometimes the simple person may have in a completion of their attributes of their emotions, he wanted to give that and gift that even to the intellectual. If someone's an intellectual, or at least when they're studying Torah, that they shouldn't just have the intellect, but they should have open flow of emotion and a connection.
Just because somebody's a scholar doesn't mean they aren't also emotional, or just because somebody isn't a scholar, as quotes a simple person, doesn't mean that they aren't intellectual.
100%. But what the Baal Shem Tov was, in those days, you have to remember, in those days, there was a huge divide in the Jewish people. And there was a major separation between what was called the Bali Mochin, the intellectuals, and the simple people. Very much so. They didn't intermingle at all. The Baal Shem Tov broke that barrier. Yes, it's not a rule that every single intellectual doesn't have emotions, or every single simple person doesn't have intellect. But the Baal Shem Tov broke this idea that there's a disconnect. The Rebbe, not only that he broke the idea, he wanted everyone to learn that there's something to learn from every person. The Rebbe says, okay, Shana, though you could argue with the Rebbe. The Rebbe said that a true intellectual doesn't have this, so to say, freedom of being connected unconditionally to their emotions. In general, intellect, the mind restricts. You see that many times. You see, the mind restricts a person from freedom, and that's you could learn
Well, the Rebbe was preaching that the mind should rule over the emotions. That's what he's preaching. That.
Yes, the mind should rule over the emotions.
That's the Chabad.
100%. Chacham Das is that Moich Shal Talalev. That's Tanya. But not in a way that in a healthy way, not in a way that means you should have the moichin and also have the midas, but in a way that's yes, you shouldn't let your emotions run wild, but you should but at the same time let your emotions run wild spiritually. That balance.
I thought, yeah, exactly. I thought the whole idea is to try to achieve balance between the different aspects.
Very good. Udugma. Here the Rebbe is going to go into an example. Udugma b'midas hapetachim. When it comes to the attribute of trust. Trusting Hashem, right? We all know bitachon. Shmitzad haseichel, if a person uses their mind, sometimes you think, not because God can't give you, I'm not worthy that God should give me. So the intellectual comes and says, 1 second, if God was me, if I was God, I would never give this person anything. I know I'm not worthy of it. I have sins. I'm not trusting. I have all the negatives why God shouldn't want to give me. A simple person that doesn't get complicated. When that person opens up the Birchas HaMazon and it says God provides to the world kulai, the whole world, betuvai with his goodness, bechein with his grace, bechesed with his kindness, berachmas compassion. He's part of that world. Even if the simple Jew doesn't know the meaning of those words. Knows the concept. He doesn't question that. The Torah says that God is trustworthy and He provides for everyone. Doesn't go into the whole conversation. If I'm worthy, I'm not worthy. What Torah Chassidus wants. This is what Charna was leading to. That's not just that you should have unconditional belief without the intellect, but you should understand that God, the idea of bitachon. God gave you a brain, use it, but use it with the freedom of the simple person. Have unconditional trust in Hashem and have it in hasag and understanding. Really subscribe to the idea that God can help you and will help you. That I've always would say, bitachon is about actually believing that God can and will help you. Let's go a little further. And this is one of the uniqueness of the Baal Shem Tov. And he revealed, as a tam vaspar shebedavar defarvos. This is what it means. The Baal Shem Tov revealed the why of Avos Yisrael. So he says here, the Rebbe even goes in deeper. What does it mean, the farvos? If the idea is just completion of the midos, of the attribute, why do we have to understand the attribute, understand the Avos Yisrael? The idea is it's not enough just that the intellectual should surrender his or her mind. The Baal Shem Tov wanted that you were gifted with intellect, understand the quality of simplicity, understand the quality of unconditional emotional connection. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have to go and wish everyone. We have just 2 minutes here. It's the last few lines of the Sicha. Mikol now moving from this understood. What does it mean to love a fellow Jew? It's not just to love a Jew outwardly. It should be inwardly, connected to your core of your soul. And then we have what the Alter Rebbe says. Loving your fellow Jew as a vessel is the way to love God. Like it says in Rashi, b'maimer Hillel, the Allah tzani l'chavrecha le'savet, reach v'reya avicha al tazav zakadosh baruch hu. The Rashi explains by the story of Hillel, who says that to love what you don't want to do to be done to you, don't do to others. He connects what your love for Hashem to your love to another person. When a person loves the next person from the pnimius, from the core. Then you're not just connecting to the outwardly of the person, you're connecting to the pnimius of the person. And what is the essence of every person? Godliness. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, the Rebbe says, what does it mean that loving your fellow person is helps loving God? Because the pnimius of every person is the nefesh elikis. So when you reach the nefesh elikis of the next person, not only loving another person, through that is a gateway to loving Hashem. Loving God and loving Hashem is all one. All right, everyone, I need to run. I want to wish you all a good Shabbos and again, beautiful Farbrengen. We should be able to